Welcome to the Filmed Live Musicals podcast, a podcast about stage musicals that have been legally filmed and publicly distributed. The Filmed Live Musicals website contains information on nearly 200 musicals that have been captured live. Check it out at filmedlivemusicals.com. And now, on with the show. Welcome to the next episode of the Filmed Live Musicals podcast. I'm your host, Luisa Lyons, and my guest today is actor and singer Christian Cieri, composer of the new musical, The Humoral Funeral Parlor on the Corner of the Street, a killer musical comedy, which premiered in October 2022 as a staged reading at the Emerging Artists Theatre Fall 2022 New Work Series. The reading was filmed live at the TADA Theatre in New York and is now available to stream on YouTube. Welcome, Christian.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So to get us started, what made you fall in love with musical theater?
I feel like for a lot of people, there's kind of like a certain time where like, oh, I saw this show and it changed my life forever. For me, it was just kind of like over the course of growing up, we just always had musicals playing on different movie musicals playing in my house. I grew up loving The Wizard of Oz and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Those were like the two big ones, and Bye Bye Birdie as well. And we always had like Beauty and the Beast on repeat and The Little Mermaid, because Beauty and the Beast was my mom's favorite. Little Mermaid was my sister's. And yeah, and my mom would always listen to cast albums in the car. Chorus Line and Jesus Christ Superstar were like her go-tos. And my dad would also take me to like high school productions of The Wizard of Oz, because that like was my favorite movie, still kind of is. It's definitely like top 3. So yeah, I just kind of like grew up always wanting to do musicals because I was just always around them. And then I got to high school and I got to do my first show, which was Joseph. And after that, I was like, all right, this is it. I love it. This is happening somehow.
This is my calling.
Yeah.
Are your parents theater people too?
So my mom is definitely more of the musical theater lover out of the two of my parents, but my dad was always like a very musical music person, because he hosted a radio show in college and was a DJ for like a really long time after college. So he always just had an appreciation for all different kinds of music. But my mom, I think in high school, she did stage crew, and actually I think in high school she went on a trip to see a Chorus Line with like the original cast, other than Cassie, I think, was the only person that wasn't the original cast. So yeah, so they have always kind of appreciated music and theater and musical theater. And my sister also was a dancer growing up. So I kind of had all the components of musical theater as a part of my household growing up.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And is your sister older or younger?
She's 5 years older than me.
Did you have your own I can do that moment with her tap shoes?
I really did, because um I remember listening to that song in the car with my mom and thinking, oh, this is just like me, because I can also dance. And I wanted for years to do dance lessons at the studio that she was on the dance team for. And like my first year that I was old enough to, I was like, I want to do tap and jazz. And I'm so thankful I did that, because I really think doing tap dancing as a kid really helped me like understand rhythm and music a lot better, because you really have to pay attention to, the timing of your sounds and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Long Branch, New Jersey, which is right in central Jersey on the shore. I grew up in a house that was like a mile from the beach. So when everyone is always talking about like, oh, I want to go to the beach and, spend summers at the beach, whatever. And I'm like, I grew up there. The beach means nothing to me. Like sorry.
Did you spend a lot of time coming into the city to see shows in person?
No, actually, I didn't go. So when I was a baby, I was in the city for like medical stuff, but I didn't go to the city to see a Broadway show until I think I was in, oh my gosh, I want to say 8th grade. I
Mm-hmm.
think, I think it, because my dad worked at CBS for years, commuting to the city every day, and he, had this mentality that like New York City was dangerous and like he didn't want to take his kids into the city, which, that's I'm not going to speak on what New York City was at the time. I wasn't in New York City, but that was his mentality. But eventually my mom was like, we have to take them to see a Broadway show,
Mm.
please. So we went to go see Wicked. That was my first show ever. And then after that, it just opened the doors to my
Mm.
parents taking us into the city. So I saw 9 to 5, which was such a great show. I think people really sleep on that show. It's really, really, really fantastic.
Amazing
Um,
cast too.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Seeing the three of
Alice and
them.
Janney.
Yeah. So phenomenal. We saw the Bye Bye Birdie revival with John Stamos, which was really fun. Oh my, there's just so many. I got to see Lion King on a school trip, which was really cool. So yeah, so like after 8th grade, I really started to go into the city a lot to see a bunch of shows.
The doors opened up for you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned movie musicals earlier. Did you also watch like great performances or like theater that was filmed live?
The first time I really watched a filmed version of like a performance was probably I don't actually remember watching it when it first came out, but I had a memory of seeing Legally Blonde on TV, because that I
Hmm.
feel like for our generation was like the first big pro shot, and like, you know, was the first time like a modern musical was like kind of put out for public viewing. But then when I was in college my freshman year, I took it was a Sondheim course, but it was titled like American Musical Theater Sondheim or something like that.
Hmm.
And so we watched a bunch of pro shots of his shows, but we also had to watch a pro shot of Oklahoma with Hugh
Hugh
Jackman, like that
Jackman.
that version.
Yeah, from the National
Um,
Theatre. Yeah.
yeah, and we watched the Neil Patrick Harris version of Company. We watched the original Into the Woods pro shot, Sweeney Todd, Sunday in the Park. All those, I think they were filmed for PBS. If I'm
Yeah,
I'll,
great
I'll buzz.
performances or live from Lincoln Center, one of the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was really cool to see those, especially because I had never really, it's going to sound bad, but I never really interacted with Sondheim works up until that point. And then I watched it. I was like, oh my God, Into the Woods is incredible. Oh my God, Sweeney Todd's incredible. Oh my God, I've been missing out. Company is great.
Did you see the company with Raul Esparza that they filmed? That was like that's
No,
around that kind of period, the 2007, 2008.
we may have watched like a clip in the class. I never like sat down and watched it myself. I just saw the Neil Patrick Harris version. I was like, that was great. And, but then I saw the revival that recently happened in New York, and I was like,
Mm.
oh, this is also how you can do this show. There's multiple ways. So,
Oh, so many ways. And
yeah.
what I love about Company is that there's several pro shots of it. There's one from the UK, from Many a Chocolate Factory.
Speaking of, I watched when we were doing the Sondheim class. We also got to see the Merrily We Roll Along, that pro shot that they
Mm,
released in theaters,
so
and
good.
it was really funny because I also got to see that recently off Broadway before. I think it's done now and it's transferring.
Yeah,
Um, and I remember sitting down to watch it, and it said in the program, it was like, this is it, like, it was all like kind of the same production. I was like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, I've kind of already seen the show. I'm so excited to see it again.
Yeah.
Uh, Great, really, really great production. It was
So,
fantastic. They were lottery tickets, and we were front row all the way,
oh,
stage left. And it was so funny because Jonathan Groff and Daniel Radcliffe would just like be right in front of us, like to the point where I could just reach out and like shake their hand. It was kind of insane.
see the sweat coming off their brow.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I got some Jonathan Groff spit
Oh, yeah,
in my direction at some
famous.
point. Yeah.
I love that. Oh, that's so great. So I wanted to ask about your college studies. So you went to school for digital media studies?
Yeah. So I originally was going to go to school for video game design, because if there's one thing I like as much as musical theater, it's video games. Um, I I literally will stay up until like 2 a.m. playing Pokemon or whatever, and then I regret it the next morning. Um, so I was going to school for video game design, and then I took a coding class, and I was like, "Oh, this is not for me. I'm really bad at this." Because if anyone is listening knows coding, it's like kind of another language, and I'm really bad at languages. So I was like, "Oh no, this is a mistake." So I stayed within the major of digital media studies, but I kind of transitioned into video and audio editing, which I kind of already
Ooh.
knew about because my sister and I had grown up doing like Lego stop motion videos. And so I would watch her do all the editing, and I kind of was like, "Oh, okay, this makes sense. You just kind of splice and drag and drop."
Oh,
That,
that's
you
so
know.
cool.
So yeah, and actually one of the first big projects I did for my it was like the art of video editing or something, was we had to do like a full production, like not a full like video. It was like a 5 minute video just to show off like different kinds of editing and stuff. And so I actually took one of the songs for my show because I had been starting to write it at the time, and I grabbed my friend Olivia, and I was like, "You're gonna sing this song with me and be in this video." And she's like, "Okay, cool." Um, so that was really fun to do. But so I did the digital media studies, but I also threw in a business minor, just because it was like junior year, and I was like, I don't feel like digital media studies is marketable enough. Let me add on a business minor.
Mm.
And I had also been taking. I went to University of Rochester, which is connected to Eastman School of Music, so I got to take voice lessons there, which was super freaking cool. My voice professor was phenomenal, and he we had to sing opera, but he had a background in musical theater. So
Mm.
he was like, "We can sing whatever you want. I just need to make sure you have one opera piece ready for your juries." I was like, "Great, fantastic." Um, but I had kind of been taking those courses and other music classes that I had almost enough for a music minor, but I was one class shy, and I couldn't take it because I needed it to take the prerequisite my spring senior semester, and so it was too late. I was like, "Oh, damn it." It was like an appreciation of jazz or something. And I remember
Yeah.
sitting in the first day, and the professor was like, I went up to the professor and I was like, "I'm currently taking music theory too." And he was like, "You need that to take this. I'm gonna tell you right now, you're gonna fail this class. I'm so sorry." And I was like, okay, bye."
Oh, no. So
So
close.
yeah, it, it's fine. I like to say that I had a music minor, but I technically did not. But I was so close. I like
You have the
to
knowledge. It may not be on
yes,
paper, but it's there. So
exactly.
what inspired you to start writing a show?
Um, so in college, we didn't have a musical theater department. They had a theater program through the English department, but they didn't have a dedicated like musical theater major, or they didn't do any musicals at school. Um, and I had done it for 4 years in high school, and I was so desperate to continue. And we had a student run group called Off Broadway on campus, and we did like reviews every semester, but we didn't do full book shows. And the reasoning I was always told was because the auditorium was too old and couldn't support it. And I was like, "You can do small stuff. You can do black box musicals. Like it's
They
whatever.
exist
It's
now.
fine." Um, so I remember thinking to myself, well, you know what? I'll just write a play that my friends and I can do, or I'll just write, a show that my friends and I can do, and we'll rent out, a conference room or something, and we'll sell tickets and just have a fun time. And that was kind of in the back of my head. And I remember um, when the inspiration for Humoral Parlor struck. I was watching an episode of Bob's Burgers, um, and there's a season one episode where Linda Belcher wants to put on a dinner theater show, and it's a murder mystery, and she plays a funeral director, and she ends up being the killer. And there's this really funny joke where the show starts and she's like, "It's not me," and then at the end she's like, "It's me," and the audience is like, you told us it wasn't you at the beginning. What is this? And I remember I watched that and I was like, gosh, that's so funny because and I'm not making this up. This is my actual train of thought that happened in the moment. I was like, that's so funny because a funeral director makes money off of when people, die and have funerals. So that'd be really funny if like there was a story about a funeral director killing people for business. And then it just clicked in my head. And I don't want to sound pretentious and say like the muse has struck me, but it really like all of a sudden these characters and like the whole concept kind of just like came out of nowhere and hit me like a ton of bricks. And it really was that moment of like, I need to write this story somehow. And I
Mm.
was like, I've been looking for an idea for a show for my friends and I to do. Let's try and work this out. And I spoiler alert, it didn't happen because I didn't finish it in time. But I initially wrote it to kind of be just like a fun little thing for my college friends and I to do. And then here I am now talking on a podcast about it and having done a reading of it.
Oh, that's so great. And I love the concept of it. It has like Sweeney Todd vibes, but like the style of You're in Town almost. Like
Yeah.
it's so much fun. So what before we go into the show, what aside from your singing training, did you have other formal music training?
No, so I actually when I started writing the show, I wrote it as a play originally, because I knew I wanted it to be a musical, especially because I think the concept is just kind of so out there that I was like it's best served with music. Like I feel it that like I can see the kind of show it could be if it was a musical. So I wrote it as a play, kind of mentally noting, oh, okay, a song will go here. And I actually use some of the dialogue as certain lyrics, or to kind of, change and inspire to become lyrics. But the reason why I wrote it as a play is because I had never written music before, um, other than maybe like an 8-bar melody when I was a kid to like randomly sing and then instantly forgot about. So, I just kind of I remember freshman year, I was in a lounge on my floor in my dorm, and someone was writing music, and I was like, "How do you do that?" And they were like, "Oh, you just kinda do it. Like, I can't really explain it." Um, and he, like, gave me an example, and I was like, "Oh, I guess it can be that easy." And then a year later, when I started writing the show my sophomore year, I was like, I will try it. Let me start it as a play first. And I remember walking to my dorm and coming up with the opening lyrics of it's starting to get very quiet. It's starting to get hard to see. And the melody kind of formed with the words. And that's kind of how I approached the whole rest of it. It was like, if I can look at the words and they kind of speak to me in song, and then I can build off that.
Mm.
Um, and that's kind of the genesis of how the music started, but I had no other form of like music training beforehand. And then I went on to take music theory courses, so I was able to go back and kind of tweak and like add in cadences and chords that fit better than what I had written without kind of like changing the melody that much.
Mm.
Um, so it started with no training, and then when I did take classes, I was able to go back and kind of just like tighten everything up.
Oh, what a cool way to implement what you were learning, like
Yeah.
real life. Um, did you play piano or anything? How were you like first? Yeah, how were you like developing the melodies and then notating them or anything like that?
So I would I had like I would kind of like play around on the piano beforehand. I was familiar with piano. I'd taken actually a piano course in senior year in high school,
Mm.
and that if I hadn't taken that, I probably never would have been able to write the music because I learned chords. I didn't
Mm.
learn anything else, but I learned chords from that course. Not that I didn't learn anything; I didn't retain anything. I don't want anyone to listen and think that my teacher was terrible. So when I came up with the songs, um, I I would just kind of hum the melody, and then I would play the melody the best I could, always constantly messing it up because I don't know. I still to this day can't really read sheet music. Like I can read it and I can sight read and kind of guess where things are, but I can't look at sheet music and play.
Mm.
So it ended up being I would just figure out what the chord was, based on the melody, write it down, and then I didn't have any sheet music for the longest time. So I would just have like kind of like if you go on, I think it's like music tabs or whatever, it would
Like
just
lead
show like,
sheets,
yeah, it would show like the
yeah,
lyric and then like A.
the
And I'm
chord
like,
on top, yeah.
yeah. So I'm like, okay, that's how I'll write it. So that's kind of how it started. And then I will say, if it wasn't for the technology we have now, I would never have been able to write the music because I was able
Mm,
to just go in to, I think MuseScore is the software that I used. Um, and I was able to just go in and do it all on my computer, and I could hear it exactly how
mm.
I wanted it to sound. And I remember I had given the sheet music to a friend of mine to look at, and he was like, "It is so impressive that you did this all on the computer, that you took the time to type in all of these notes because holy crap, this is like good for someone who knows nothing about sheet music." I was like,
Yeah.
"Great, at least I'm on the right track."
That is oh, okay, that is so inspiring and so exciting. Like MuseScore is like open software, freely available online, and it takes a lot of finagling to learn how to use it.
Yeah.
It's not always straightforward. So I love that that was your process and how you were implementing what you were learning at school into your process. I That is just so cool. So what would you say are your music inspirations, and what is the style of the show?
Um, I don't know if I have one singular like or I can list off the top of my head like, oh, this style inspired me. Each song kind of was I approached each song as like I, I, I'll take it back for a sec. So the show, the show itself kind of started as kind of like it was supposed to be very funny, breaking the fourth wall, kind of a send up of like different things I liked at the time, mainly Clue and Little Shop.
Mm.
And I typically describe the show as if Clue, Little Shop, and Adam's Family, the musical, all had a baby. Um, so that's kind of how I approached each song was like, for the most part, I was like, okay, what am I trying to emulate? What musical theater song trope am I trying to, for lack of a better term, make fun of or reference? And so that kind of the songs that I wrote in college, that kind of directed how I was how I wrote the songs. So, for example, "O Careen," which is the second song in Act Two, is a direct was directly inspired by "Damn It, Janet" in Rocky Horror, which I was also obsessed with in college at the time. Um, so that was kind of and that one kind of stands out because it's very very like 50s rock ish, which it didn't start out that way. And then when I was recording it with my friend Haley for the demo, she did something and I was like, what was that? She was like, let me have my hairspray moment, like this is what the style you wrote. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that works, cool, let's go with that. And knowing that I'd written it in a Damn It Janet style, I don't know why I was so surprised when she did this like think that you should go. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And I don't know why I didn't do that. But that was kind of the, you know, I mean, I was I was at the time when I started writing it, I had just taken that Sondheim course, so there was a lot of Sondheim influence. Little Shop is my all-time favorite show, so that was also a pretty heavy influence on it. Rocky Horror at the time, like I said, and film scores too. I think also
Mm.
really specifically the score for Clue. Um, they rely a lot on harpsichord, which I originally used a lot of in like early like demo orchestrations. So it really was just like a mash of things I liked at the time and still do. Um, but again, like a lot of the songs are, if I were to go through, I could say like, oh, this song was, kind of inspired by this. Like Let Them Die, which is the Act One finale, where, spoiler alert, all the characters decide to do something a little heinous. That it opens with lyrics that directly reference a little priest in Sweeney. What a shame, what a waste, seems a downright shame. I seem, um, and so that song was, clearly inspired by that, but also kind of Feed Me from Little Shop. So, it all kind of, there's a song, Have the Lady Decide for Herself, where the two gentlemen are fighting over the secretary, Corrine. And it's kind of lost in the recording, but the idea is like they would be arguing with each other and flying around the stage, not like actually flying, but like the blocking would always lead them away from her, and she would be like, aren't I who you're talking about? I'm right over here and you left me. And that was inspired by oh my gosh, I've Decided to Marry You from A Gentleman's Guide.
Exactly what I was thinking of when I was watching it. I was like, in my notes, I had like Gentleman's Guide meets Sweeney Todd
Yeah. Yeah. So
meets
that,
Urinetown.
yeah. So that, and that's, you're the first person I think that I've ever heard reference Urinetown, because I've only really seen that show once. But that
The kind
I
of
do
like,
I do love that show. So that's a great. I'm so happy to hear that reference as well.
it's like this tongue in cheek, like the show is very self aware, wink, wink, but it also takes itself seriously, which like that's Urinetown. I
Yeah.
love that. The always the knowing wink to the audience through which what I loved is that in the reading the performances weren't necessarily that they're not necessarily campy, but in the music is always like wink.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that and it's like I said, when it started it was very breaking the fourth wall. And then I remember there was the professor who taught my Sondheim course. I went like 2 years later afterwards. I had already been writing the show for a year, and I had a completed draft, and I gave it to him, and I was like, "Could you just read it and like tell me what you think of it?" And he was like, "Sure." And I was thinking like he's gonna be like, "This was great." And then I sat down with a meeting with him, and he handed me a packet that was a printout of Sondheim telling the story about how he did the same thing with,
with
I think it was
Oscar
Oscar Hammer.
Hammerstein.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he did the same thing, and he was like, critique it like you would any other show. And Oscar Hammerstein was like, okay, it sucked. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh no, oh no. Um, and he basically said this was, and the show was so much different at the time, a completely different ending. It started as a true Faustian tale, a la Little Shop and Sweeney, where the characters of Maxim and Sarah did not survive. Um, and he was like, the first page, I knew exactly how the ending was going to go down. I knew who wasn't going to make it. And he was like, your dialogue is not how people talk. And he was like, I know that might be the style, but on paper, it doesn't work. And then another thing he said that really like opened my eyes. At the time, I had a narrator who was doubled with another character who I cut, but I kept the narrator. And he said, "Why do you have a narrator? Your story's linear. You don't need a narrator." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a holdover because it was originally a character was kind of telling the story." And he said, "Well, you cut the character, so you can't leave in any remnants that don't make sense." And I was like, "Huh, that makes sense."
How generous of him to read it and give you such detailed feedback too.
Yeah, and at the time, I didn't have any demo recordings, so he didn't know what the music was. So he was
Mm,
going solely off the written book.
yeah.
And I really I can't stress, like, at the time I was so upset about it, but I really can't stress like how important that was to the development of the show, because it really, another really like eye-opening thing he said was, he asked, what is your show about? And I sat there and I was like, and he was like, you need to know that, you wrote it, you need to have an answer. And he was like, and I don't mean what actually happens, what is the thesis of your show? And I was
Mm.
like, damn, I guess it doesn't have one, because it wasn't really designed to have one. It was supposed to be, kind of
This is
fluff,
just for me
which,
and my friends.
yeah, and which is fine. Like, I think it is totally fine for shows and other forms of art to not have any kind of like, it doesn't, not everything needs to tell this incredible story, but every story should have, when I say incredible story, I mean like this like important message. You know, some
Mm,
things can just be for entertainment, but it should still kind of have some kind of thing that drives it and is the purpose for it being told. And if it's to just be entertaining and fun, then it better be entertaining and fun. And my show definitely was not at the time.
mm. So what was the journey? So there was you've written on social media that it was 8 years from when you the first watched Bob's Burgers and got inspired, all the way to the reading at the New Work series. So what was that journey? What happened in between?
So I started writing it in 20, I guess, well, it was, I started college 2013 and I started writing it 2014. So it actually might be 7 years. I might have gotten my dates wrong. Um, but I started it in 20, that fall semester of 2014. Um, and I wrote it all through college. I met with the professor my junior year or senior year. Yeah, it was my senior year. And I reworked it again into a closer form of what it is now. Um, and, you know, I left college. I worked in marketing for 2 years doing community theater. And I had one table read of it with, I had a couple table reads with friends in college, but the form that is available now to view as the reading, that closely resembles it. I had the first table read with some of my community theater friends, um, within the first year of leaving college. Um, and then from there, I kind of, you know, I was like, I'm gonna edit it, and I want it to kind of take on another form, and maybe I can submit it to a local community theater, and it can be a production because, you know, it would be, the rights would be cheap because it's not really licensed. It would just be me. Um, and I would just be honored for it to be on a stage. I wouldn't be, you know, demanding anything crazy. Um, and then the pandemic happened, and, you know, I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll just continue editing it. Um, and after college, added in some extra songs. And then, so during the pandemic, I kind of edited it, and I made this note to myself, mental note of like, I am going to get it to a point that when live theater comes back, it is ready to go, and I will just find somewhere that will do it, and it'll just be ready to go. And it right before the pandemic happened, I was doing a dinner theater show in North Jersey, and I got into working with our music director. He was assistant music director at the time. His name was Mitch, and he was a really really fantastic guy. And then the pandemic happened, and we shut down. And then we went back spring of 2022 to kind of finish off the contract, which was kind of crazy. 2 years later, we were back doing the show. Um, but I still remembered so much of it because they kept us all on our tracks for just like ease of rehearsal. And I was more familiar with him, and I had a better, you know, kind of repertoire with him. And so I was like, hey, I wrote this show. I have sheet music for it, but I've never written sheet music. I know you've written musicals before. I would love, you know, if you could just take a look and tell me like what needs to be done. He was like, sure. So we met, and he was like, what's your goal? And I said, I would love to do a reading in fall of 2022 by the end of this year. And he said, okay, I think, you know, we can work and, you know, make something happen with that. And he said, I had a friend of mine put together a list of theaters that take original works. I will gift it to you, use it at your discretion. And so I went through, and basically any theater that I felt I kind of fit the criteria, I just submitted to. And so there was one theater that I submitted to, the Emerging Artist Theater. And I think what really helped was I also didn't have any um, experience as a writer, and they were specifically new works, new artists, which I feel like a lot of the other theaters also, they wanted like artistic statements and like, other like examples of your work. And I was like, I don't even have an artistic statement. Like I
I'm
don't
just
know.
starting.
Yeah. And I was so grateful. I was doing Greece I was in New Jersey. I was playing Eugene, which I for so long despised Grease, and then I was in it, and I was like, "Oh, this is actually a fun show." I don't know why I disliked it for so long. Um, and I remember getting that email. We had like a show in the afternoon, and I woke up to that email of like, "You've been accepted to the Emerging Artist Theater," and I was like, "I need to do this. Like, I have to jump on this." And that was the beginning of the summer. I cast at the end of the summer. We rehearsed for like a month and a week, and then we had our reading on the 5th.
Oh, that is so cool. And part of and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the new work series by the Emerging Artist Theatre, it's they provide like funding for you to do like 3 to 4 weeks of rehearsal.
So they provide the space, the stage management, and the tech,
Mm,
um, and they have spaces available for rehearsal, but you have to book them. So if
mm,
someone, it's first come first serve. So if you don't get it in time, you don't get it. Um, and they also provide the ticketing service, but they don't provide any funding.
uh-huh.
So it's really they provide all of the help that they can give, just short of giving funding. So I don't want it to sound like I'm saying they didn't give me anything. They give you the space. They give you a full tech rehearsal. They give you whatever rehearsal space they can offer, and really all the support that they can provide. Um,
Mm,
so the funding came from myself and whatever donations I was able to get through GoFundMe. Who were
mhm.
I put everyone in the playbill that I had. I was like, here are all our donors. Thank you so much. They're also at the end of the read through.
Hey, you got to have your patrons. Oh, I this is so cool. And going back to when you first showed the script to your college professor and you got the feedback, what was your inspiration to keep going? Even like the feedback wasn't so great at that stage. So what made you say, "Yes, I believe in this script. I want to keep going."
I think it was just because I had spent so much time on it, and
Mm,
I I think that was really just it. It was I didn't want to give up on it because it had been 2 years of work, and I really I really just thought that there was something about it that I feel like kind of like tickled the funny bone in the best way, like in the perfect way of everyone who I told it to. Everyone was always kind of like, "Huh, that's really funny." And I was like, "Okay, so like people like it. I just have to make it good."
And when you performed, um, you did the one night reading at the TADA Theatre. Am I
Yes.
saying that correctly?
Yeah.
What was do you get feedback afterwards? Is there a formal process through EAT?
Yeah, so they did a 30-minute Q&A afterwards. And I I was a little nervous about that because they really were like, "You need to have questions. It can't just be like, tell me what you thought." Um, and
Mm,
I did get some interesting feedback. Kind of, most of it was praise, specifically about the music, and which was really nice. It's also most of the audience were, I had two friends from college who were actually in that student group who surprised me. Both my parents were there. My boyfriend's whole family was there, and my boyfriend as well, who also I want to give a shout out to Ryan that he was the a really huge help in the whole process. Um, he was kind of like my assistant slash like associate producer. I don't want to call him like like a PA. So but I had all people in the audience that were there to support. So, you know, they weren't going to be like, this was terrible. I didn't like this part. So it was helpful in that regard that I got to like hear what people liked. Um, I think if I had been a little more brave, I would have asked, was there anything you didn't like or wish had been a little different? Um, but that was on me that I didn't, you know, I didn't necessarily want to ask those things because, you know, I'm so very protective of it. And, you know, it really is like my baby that I worked on for so long. And, you know, to hear criticism of it, especially the music, would probably, you know, I just like wasn't in the right headspace to hear anything negative, which is not good, but you know, it is what
Well,
it
you've done
is.
it now. You've put it out there, and
Yeah.
so I'm curious what made you decide to film it and make it available.
Honestly, it's a few reasons. One was I don't know what the future of the show is, and if this was as far as it goes, I want there to be documentation of it, and so that I can go back and say I at least did this, and it was great. Um, I also wanted to have a filmed version of it so I could, you know, send it to places if anyone was ever like, if you have a recording of your show that you're submitting, send it, you know, because it's a lot easier to kind of show
Mm.
what the work is if you can show what it is versus reading it on a page, which doesn't always, you know, do it justice. And also, there were a lot of people like my sister, who currently lives out in Wisconsin, who really wanted to see it. A lot of the cast members, families who, you know, couldn't come to see it, really wanted to see it. My grandmother, who was in Florida at the time. There were just a lot of people that I knew wanted to see it, and I wanted to be able to let them, you know, let them see it. People who really cared about me and the show, and you know, again, like the cast members as well, like people who wanted to support them.
Mm. And speaking of your cast, you have, pardon the pun, a killer cast. There is like the performances are so strong, and their voices are incredible.
Yeah, and I didn't know any of them beforehand except for the actor who plays Maxim. I knew him from Polar Express. I did it when we did it in 2021. um
Shout out.
yeah. Yes.
For
um
listeners who don't know, Christian and I met doing the Polar Express in Whippany, New Jersey. It's still
yes.
one of the coolest jobs I've ever had.
Yeah, yes, it really, yeah, because I love trains and musical theater, so I got to show up every day and sing on a train. I'm like, this, I mean,
Here is a
how
musical set on a train.
yeah. Um, so yeah, and I met the cast all through backstage. I put out a casting call, and I got kind of an overwhelming amount of people. It was like I think it was over 100, and I was
Wow.
so shocked because I was thinking maybe I'll get 20 people. And of course, all of the, you know, female identifying actors that submitted, most of them, I want to say at least 80% of them all submitted for Korean. And so that was probably the hardest character to cast because I had so many submissions for her. And it really, and especially the female characters, there were, for Sarah, for Miss Norcross, and for Kareen, there were all like two or three actresses that were like, it was just down to like one thing that put them over the edge. And specifically for Korean, shout out to my friend Emmy, who I met through the process. She put bloopers in her callback, and I was just so like, I love her sense of humor, and I feel like she's really gonna vibe with the material. I'm not saying do that for every show actors submit for, but for me, it worked.
That is super fun. I love that. That would be a fun audition tape to watch.
Yeah. I just want to say as well, in terms of the casting, you know, I know that as actors we kind of strive for perfection in our self tapes, which are still happening. Even though we're kind of, equity has kind of been like, in person is back, and it's like, well, not for all theaters. Um, there were so many self tapes I got where, you know, it wasn't a perfect backdrop. It wasn't, for Emmys, for example, hers was filmed in portrait, but I was able to, that didn't bother me in the casting. And again, I'm not saying for all casting directors, they'll kind of look past, but, sometimes the imperfections can kind of bring out more of your personality. And, that's kind of how I got to see, especially with Emmy, I got to see like how she was as a person and a performer.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the best things you can do as a performer is sit on the other side of the desk and understand what it is to watch those videos and it is to cast. And you kind of, for me, I know, and I've done it, I'm like, oh, I get it now. It's like, it isn't personal. Like everything that they say in those workshops, it's true.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
personal. They want you to succeed. They want to see you.
I got such a better understanding of the casting process by doing it.
Mm.
And like I said, there were, for some characters, it got down to like 2 or 3 people. And I did send, you know, rejection emails, which a lot of people also don't do, which please do that. um, um, but well, I guess I shouldn't say that because I know some actors don't like getting them and they would prefer just to not hear. But to each their own. I like to just have a definitive thank you, but no. Um,
At
and
least
for the
acknowledge, thank you for your time.
Yeah, and for the people who, who I really had such a difficult time picking through, I made sure to kind of personalize them a bit because, I did have like
Mm.
a format for, because I just had so many. I couldn't personalize every single one, but for the ones that I was really like, this person is really special. There was just one thing that this person did that kind of was more closer to what I was looking for through no fault of anyone. And I really just made sure to emphasize in those, like,
Mm.
I really hope that the chance comes that we get to work together in the future because you're really, really great. Um, and some people responded like, "Thank you so much." Some people didn't. I didn't, take that personally because
Mm.
I don't respond to rejection emails all the time, but you know,
Yeah. And now you have a Rolodex of some of New York's finest
yeah,
for your
yes,
future
yeah.
projects. So what is going to happen next with the Humoral Funeral Parlor?
That I don't know. In an ideal world, someone will watch it and think, I know the perfect place for this, and I'll get into contact with someone. Um, I obviously Broadway is like everyone's dream. I think that this show is definitely, um, could definitely go to off Broadway or like regional. That's like my dream. That I think is like an
Mm.
attainable dream, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Um, that's what I would love to see next is some kind of like regional production or potentially off Broadway. Because I think because it's just so inspired by Little Shop and, those kind of like Clue-ish Rocky Horror-ish kind of shows that I feel like can be very intimate if done in an off-Broadway theater, especially Little Shop. I feel like has, the revival is going so well. I think because it's returned to its off-Broadway roots.
Mm.
I feel like that's the dream.
Well, you've put it out into the universe, so
Yes.
let's see what comes back. Um, this is my final segment. It's called My Favorite Things, where I ask you my favorite questions.
These are a few of my favorite things.
To start off, what is your favorite musical?
I think I said earlier, it's definitely Little Shop of Horrors. I actually have a Google alert set up for anytime anyone posts auditions for that show. So if anyone's listening and needs a non-union or union eligible Seymour, hello. But also recently, Phantom of the Opera has been getting up there because I know it has an end date now, and it's listening to the music it's just such an incredible show. And when people say it's like overhyped or whatever, I'm like, yeah, because it's good and everyone loves it. Like, so I would say that's definitely number 2 right now, but like really, really close to 1.
Beautiful. Do you have a favorite musical that has been filmed live on stage?
I would ooh. I would probably say Into the Woods because I really adore that original cast. I would say Into the Woods. And I also that's like the first pro shot that I watched, not in the Sondheim course, but the first one I watched and was like, why doesn't every show do this? Because the company one was, um, I think it was like a concert version, so it wasn't like a
Yeah.
full production. Um, but this was like the full production of the original staging and everything, and I'm like, why doesn't every show do this?
Why doesn't every show do this? That is the question that makes
Yes.
me crazy. A filmed live musical, so theater filmed on stage, is not quite a stage show and it's not quite a movie. So what should we call it?
I just love the term pro shot, professionally shot. Um, I don't really know if um I don't even know if I have an idea of what anything could be called other than just what's already in the lexicon of pro shot.
I like pro shot too.
Yeah, I think it just
Where,
sums it up.
yeah, where do you stand on bootlegs?
Um, I don't want to get in trouble. I think that it's unfortunate that theater artists don't get paid for them. Um, but I think that they're honestly instrumental to certain shows' life cycle and longevity. I feel like, especially if you look at Beetlejuice, I feel like that really only blew up through TikTok, through sharing of clips of the show. I'm like trying to pick my words carefully. I think that the inaccessibility of theater, specifically of Broadway, has kind of helped to create, I don't want to say it's the only reason why, it kind of like helped to create the market of bootlegs. And I feel like unless we get to a point where pro shots are more common, they're just going to be there. And I think that the people who really seek them out are the people who would still want to go see the show, or it's just people who genuinely cannot get to New York, and if they had an option to legally consume a show, they would.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I love that. Which stage musicals do you wish had been filmed?
Phantom of the Opera and Little Shop. um, I would give anything to see Ellen Green in the original production of Little Shop. I saw her when she was at City Center when they did the revival with her with Jake Gyllenhaal, and I was so happy that I got to see her do that role. I would give anything to see her in the full original production, and Phantom now because it's closing, because it's like that original production is no one's going to be able to see it once it's closed, which I think
Yeah.
is such a travesty. But also, I wish every show did. But those are the two off the top of my head that I'm like, I really, really wish that professional filmings had been done for these shows.
Yes. And what gives me hope for Phantom is that Lloyd Webber has filmed other shows before, and like, please,
Yeah,
a call out, like, this is a show that must be captured, and
yeah,
they could, like, I don't know if it's going to be the final performance. Maybe they could, like they did with Rent, they filmed the final performance,
mm,
and you can track out all the people who've played Phantom and all the Christines, and like, that would just be amazing. Like, it's
yeah,
such a wasted opportunity if they don't, because the tickets to that last show are going to be like
yeah.
the hottest ticket in town. And
If we hadn't won the lottery for this past Wednesday, I probably I would I don't even know when I would be able to see before it closed. And I know we have the 25th anniversary, and that's a very, very, very great production, but it's not Broadway's Phantom of the Opera.
yeah, yeah, I hear ya.
Yeah.
I hear ya. Okay, Please, really useful group, Andrew Lloyd Webber, if you happen to be listening to this little podcast, please film the final performance of Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. What would you like to see filmed in the future?
Oh, Phantom of the Opera's final performance. Oh goodness. Really, I mean, just everything. Like, I hope it doesn't come across as me trying to be like film film everything when it comes out so you get the original cast, because sometimes the original cast is not always the best cast. But there's something special about that original production before it goes through different metamorphoses. So I would say every show, whether Broadway, off Broadway, any kind of premiere, I would love to see filmed. Like even out of town tryouts of shows that are premiering, I would love to see that filmed, because then you get to compare and contrast. And if you want to, later, if you're the rights holder of the show, if you really wanted to, you could kind of bury the out of town tryout pro shot if you really wanted to, and then you can be like, here's the actual show now. But I really wish that every premiere had a chance, an opportunity to be filmed.
And I love seeing different versions and how a show evolves. There's a new musical that's available to stream on Broadway on demand called Ride, a New Musical. It's about the first woman to cycle around the world, Annie Londonderry. And I had seen they had filmed a one night only workshop reading that was staged in a West End theatre in 2021. And now it's been developed. They had further workshops. And then I got to watch the full production now that they filmed at the Charing Cross Theatre. And it's just so cool to see, to be able to follow the show for that long, and be a part, I feel like I'm a part of its process just by watching it, and being able to see that development. So I think there's something to be said for that, because you're building an audience, you're creating a fan base, and there's so much to be said for how powerful a filming even early incarnations can be.
Yeah, I know. Bad Cinderella just had their first preview last night on Broadway, and they shared a clip of I think it was the title song, and it's like that. Like, I wish shows, or like Into the Woods, the recent revival, kept sharing clips upon clips upon clips of all different cast members, and I'm like, this is what just film more, even just to advertise, get people excited.
Yeah. Oh, yes, please, and thank you. Finally, where can we find you online?
I have a website that's my name, christiancieri.com. I'm on Instagram. I believe my handle is CCIERI46. And Humoral Funeral Parlor has an Instagram as well, which it's in my Instagram bio. I don't remember I think it might be Humoral Funeral Parlor. And I'm on YouTube, where I have song clips from the show. Actually, the recording itself right now is still unlisted. It's only available through what I shared on Facebook, but I am going to unlist it by the time this episode drops. I just wanted to kind of give like a little preferential treatment to the people I knew, to kind of be like, here it is.
Great. And we'll have links to all of that in the show notes. Listeners, please check out the Humoral Funeral Parlor. Good tongue twister. On YouTube. It is such a fun, delightful show. You will not be sad that you did. Christian, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really fun to chat with you.
Thank you for having me. This is the first interview I've given for the show. It's the first time anyone's been like, let's talk about it. So I'm so honored and so happy to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. The Filmed Live Musicals podcast is created and edited by your host, Luisa Lyons. FilmedLiveMusicals.com is where musicals come home. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Shout out and all the thank yous to our wonderful patrons, Josh Brandon, Geraldine Brewer, Belinda Broido, Andy Capone, Elliot Charles, Rachel Esteban, Mercedes Esteban Lyons, Hannah Graneman, James T. Lane, Alison Matthews, Al Monaco, David Negrin, Jesse Rabinowitz and Brenda Goodman, David and Catherine Rabinowitz, Joe Tilliston, and Beck Twist. Patrons generously provide financial support to preserve the history of film stage musicals and the creation of one easy place to find them all. If you would like to support the site, receive early access to this very podcast and early access to site content, become a Filmed Live Musicals patron for as little as $3 a month. Visit filmedlivemusicals.com to learn more. If you like what you hear, please leave a review on Apple Music. It really helps to get the word out about the show. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks for listening.